Good afternoon. My name is Susan Barlow, and I will be doing some introductions with regards to this webinar. I want to just give people a few minutes to log on. We've had a large amount of people who've registered, and let's just hang out for a few minutes. If you're just joining us, we're just going to give it one more minute, and then we will start the webinar. Okay, that was a quick minute. So, my name is Susan Barlow, and I am from Parent Network of Western New York, and we are one of the three partners that comprises the New York State Transition Partners. And welcome to our learning community on employment. So let me just see. Oh, there we go. See if I can get us backwards. So let me just tell you briefly about the New York State Learning Transition Partners. This is a federal grant through the Rehab Services Administration. It was a 5-year grant that actually turned into a 6-year grant. And we've come together between 3 organizations, Parent Network being one of them, include NYS and Starbridge in Rochester. And as I said, we're in our final year. Let me just tell you just a few things about what we have done over the past 6 years. We have co-hosted and are co-hosting a statewide transition conference, which we are co-hosting for June 2nd and 3rd in Albany. And we can give you some information about how you can get more details on that. We also have an e-blast, which most of you probably are receiving on a monthly basis, called Access, and that is where we put all of our information. We have developed and continue to develop a number of fact sheets and resources, all of which are housed on our website, and which is located right on the front screen in front of you. In addition, we have given out mini grants and just finished our final round of mini grants to organizations, small groups that want to maybe do a project or develop a directory or hold an event of some sort. So that's just a little bit about the New York State Transition Partners, and we are grateful for the opportunity to provide you, and this one of the deliverables of this grant is to hold some learning communities. So I'm not going to waste any more time in telling you about the grant, because I'd like to see us get started with our presentation today. It is my pleasure to introduce Anne Spisiak, who has been a long-standing partner of mine, as well as throughout the state in the areas of employment and transition. So Anne, welcome, and hopefully you can hear her loud and clear.
Thanks, Sue, and thanks to everybody for joining, and hopefully we can simplify a somewhat complex system for people just entering into the adult world. And if you have students or children that are just leaving high school, I would love to tell you that this was going to be super easy and quick and fast and painless, but unfortunately, after many, many years in the field, I know better. So I think the better you're prepared to navigate this journey, hopefully the less painful it will be for you. We're going to just kind of get our slides moving here.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why I can't forward a slide.
Click on the screen and then click again.
Nope. Nancy, I'm stuck. There you go.
I got it.
Okay.
All right. You can click past me. That's just me. Hi. A couple of the learning goals that we hope to do today are a knowledge again about the vocational options available after high school, how you're going to access those services, which are very different than how you go about getting services in school. And then we're going to hopefully gain just a better understanding of how to navigate the system, because although there are distinct systems we're going to talk about, a lot of them work together just to make it even more confusing. We're going to go pretty deep and spend a lot of our time on Access VR and on the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, because that's what I know the most about. As you have questions, this is how we're going to handle it. I'm going to turn the phone back over, or the speaker back over to Sue, and she's going to explain the question part of the presentation.
So on your screen, there is a questions panel, and that is what we're going to be using. If you see the word chat, ignore it, because it's really going to be in the questions and answers section, okay? The presentation is broken out into about 4 different sections, and we are going to stop at the end of each section so that we can get those questions and answers done related to that topic right then and there. So what I'm going to suggest you do is type in questions as they pop into your head, and we will capture them and answer them at the end of every section.
And click.
Nance, what's up with the clicking?
Nance, can you click us on? There we go. So the big now what? We learned about how to get this, what to do once the school bus came. We probably learned a lot about the whole IEP process. Hopefully the word transition is not new to anyone that's on this call, because school districts have been talking to you about this probably since your son or daughter has been 14 years old, let's hope. And as we near 18 or age 21, that word shouldn't be foreign. We are going to leave school, and we may first go to work. We may not. So know that as we talk about these employment options, they are always out there. So if the first stop on the transition journey is not employment, know that it may come later, and pretty much the process is the same, regardless of whether or not it's a student or a little bit older adult.
Nance, I don't know.
Slide, please. So many doors, and where do I start? The first thing you need to remember as you transition out of school is that you are leaving the door of school, the age of 21 or 18, whenever your child is exiting. So you are leaving entitlements. And if we could have added anything to one of these doors, one of which would have said OPWDD, one of which would have said access, We're going to start talking about eligibility, which is really different than entitlement. Because while you are entitled to free and appropriate education, based on your learning needs, we're going to start using different words now, like diagnosis and versus classification, and the documentation that's going to need to accompany that is going to be very different than the documentation you may have provided to your school district or your school district provided to you. Next slide. There we go. So first, let's talk about the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, otherwise known as OPWDD, otherwise known as OP. So that's all interchangeable words there. We just get shorter and shorter the longer we've been in the field, I think, in how we use them. Next slide. All right. If you have not started this process yet and your child is 21 years old, you need to start the process as soon as you get off this webinar, okay? If your child is 14 or 15 and you've started this process, or started this process when they were 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, reach up way high, put your hand behind your back, and give yourself a great pat because you're a little bit ahead of the game. The Office of Developmental Disabilities, again, we're going to talk about documented disabilities prior to the age of 22. A CSD classification of multiply handicapped or learning disabled does not make you eligible for the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. They are going to look for an intellectual disability on an IQ score by a certified psychologist with an IQ of 69 or below and adaptive deficits that say we need services. You can have a diagnosis of autism or cerebral palsy. We're going to need that to come from a neurologist, a physician, a licensed medical doctor. And then they throw in the closely related condition just to kind of give people who don't fit nicely in one of those categories above an option to get in. But this is going to require documentation from the families. Supporting documentation from your school district may be helpful, but they are going to be looking for medical documentation. OPWDD is going to provide you with a whole host of services: care management, residential supports, environmental mods to your house, health care, like through Medicaid, day service supports, clinic supports, training and advocacy. But we're going to spend a few moments, a couple slides from now, deeply talking about how they support employment. Now, for students who are 21 years of age, if you are aging out of school this year, particularly in the western region of the DDRO, I'm not sure all the other DDROs are like this. These are the district offices of the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. They are looking for exit summaries on your students or sons or daughters now. February 28th is the deadline for those if people want to have services by July 1. So if you're walking across that stage this year, you think OPWDD is going to be supporting your student, and you have not talked to the front door, the entry point of OPWDD, once again, you need to contact them now. And the phone number is on the slide, and I'm sure these are going to get shared with everyone after the webinar. Okay, so how and who is going to help you get these services is going to be a care coordinator. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go deeper into the presentation. We're going to move on now to the Office of Mental Health. One more slide.
Go one more.
Again, the website's there with a lot more information on the Office of Mental Health for your reference. This is another door or another room you may think you are in if your child got services as a child through the Office of Mental Health, because you're working with a diagnosis of some type of mental health or behavioral health diagnosis. The adult system in the Office of Mental Health is very different than the children's system. And entry into one door does not automatically gain you entry into the next door. So I'm going to assume that if you're getting these services for your child who is under 18, you have someone managing that care for you, and you hopefully have worked with them on navigating into the Office of Mental Health Adult Services Division. Again, there's a large scope of services that can support the individual throughout their whole life process. Employment services is one of them. I will say they are not as plentiful as the services in the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. Access VR, who we're going to talk about next, works a lot with OMH. So entry into the Access VR system could also lead to entry into the Office of Mental Health. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Anne?
Next slide, please. Thank you. Again, here's the website for Access VR, Adult and Career, and Continuing Services, Voc Rehab. We're going to click one more slide. Now,
Roll your sleeves up.
we're going to talk about eligibility. Because you may have a physical or mental impairment. And you may also have a lot of documentation that supports the fact that the student, your child, has a physical or mental impairment. But do they first and foremost want to work? You may want them to work. But if they meet with Access VR and they meet with their Access VR counselor and they are over the age of 18 and they are meeting with them alone, and the Access VR counselor says, do you want to get a job after high school? And they say, not really. Access VR will not open their case, even if they need the supports and services. Because Access VR, the VR should be in bigger letters, is all about Voc Rehab. So if you do not want a job, they will not open a case. Your disability also needs to impede your employment to work, and it isn't necessarily a developmental disability that can prevent you from working. And I will use myself as an example. If I were to acquire some type of health or physical impairment that limited my ability to use my voice, I'm an executive director, I talk a lot. I talk a real lot. I do a lot of training. I've been a trainer in my previous life. I needed to talk all the time. If I acquired a disability and suddenly lost my ability to talk, it would impede my ability to work in this profession. I may need to retool. Access VR would be there to help me retool with supports, services, or training. So even though I was able to work, and all of a sudden became unable to work, Access VR is there. So this may not only be applicable for your children, but other people you may know. People who get injured on a job, maybe they had a very physical job, they need to go to a more sedentary job. You know, I would maybe potentially, if my voice was impeded, I would need to go to more of a technology-based job. They would assist and support me with training. Okay? So you need to be able to prove that you need their help to overcome the barrier of employment. Once you prove that out and you meet with a voc counselor, you're going to get some vocational counseling. Now, a job goal is very important to Access VR. So I would just say, I want to work. They're going to say, doing what? And if you say, I want to be a professional wrestler, that's not going to be a really attainable goal, particularly coming right out of high school, right? Or you want to be a drummer in a rock band. We know many of our kids say they do. And we don't necessarily want to crush their dreams, but we also need to start being realistic about what job they want, because that Access VR counselor needs to look in this definition of occupational title book and find a code that they're going to be working toward. So the student's ability to identify a realistic job code as they are in one of their last years of high school is going to be a really important skill for them to have. Once we get past that barrier and we're meeting with that counselor and we want a job and we know what the job sort of is, it can be broad, right? I want to work in a store. You don't have to say I want to work at Target from 10 to 4, Mondays and Thursdays. You know, it can be broader than that. They will then assist with job placement, with training on the job. They will sometimes pay wages to the employer to get somebody into that entry-level job. They will provide in-depth job coaching. People may need to drive to get to their job because mom or dad don't want to have to keep doing that. They'll provide driving training. Might need some type of assistive or adaptive technology. They'll provide for that. They will also provide support and help if college is the stop between you and that job. I would refer you back to the website slide to see what is income-based as far as tuition goes. I would refer you back to their website as well as what supports they will provide. But for people who meet their income thresholds, they have paid for tuition, they have paid for books, they have paid for people's steel-toed shoes for work, because that would be one of the things that would be preventing them from going to work. They can be extraordinarily helpful in all of the things that support the person outside of the job as well as on the job. And we'll talk as we go further through the slides as how Access VR interacts with some of the other systems. Next slide. The New York State Commission for the Blind, again, website is there for much more detailed information, so we can move to the next slide. There, the Access VR for individuals who are blind, and again, that criteria being visual acuity is 20 to 200, right, or a visual field of 140 degrees. Very specific. If your child is getting some type of vision supports through their IEP, please be sure you have the documentation from probably an ophthalmologist that would support entry into this field. But they're going to act very much like Access VR with a little bit broader support. They'll also do a lot of mobility training, and they'll also work with families and individuals themselves. The Commission for the Blind is also very good at trying to help people set up with their own types of self-employment and businesses, and they have a lot of options and a lot of benefits, but they pretty much parallel the supports and services of Access VR. Why they have their own commission, we don't really know, but they do use it. If again, someone's meeting that definition, we're going to use it. And we see some questions coming in. We're going to get to those in a second. We're just going to get through next. Again, the College of Disability Services is going to be our next slide, again, with a very good resource. It's a Western New York resource on that slide, but they have lots of great reference material there, and we would highly recommend you guys using it. Just don't think it's a Buffalo thing, because it's a very well-developed program. So, eligibility for college disability services. If your child's getting a lot of support, if they are on a 504 plan and are getting a lot of accommodations, that is not going to automatically transfer to the community college. That is not going to automatically go over to the professor that is now teaching the Psych 101 class with 350 students in it, and they are not going to know that your child needs more time to take that test, or that they can't be in the room with 350 kids taking the test. The number one eligibility criteria of the College of Disability Services, and every college has one, is to self-disclose your disability. So you've gotten into the door of the college, there's another door you're going to need to find to be sure your children or students are going to get that support. Again, if your son, daughter, or student cannot tell someone what type of accommodations they need by the time they are leaving school, we still have some work to do. June's not that far away, but there's still some time left to be sure that they can say that. In working with people from the College of Disability Services and many of our local colleges, they will tell you that people do not come through their door until at least a semester or two of when it is too late. Okay? They are already failing. They have already not gotten their credits. They are on academic probation. And that is not what the College of Disability Services wants. They want to be ahead of that curve with you, but they will not come find you. They will not get a list of everyone that's failing and come to the classroom to look for your son or daughter or dorm room. So please be sure if they are headed on to college, you guys know where that office is. If they don't want to go through that door immediately, that they know where that door is. I would bet probably sometime after Columbus Day, when they're halfway through a semester and we know things are not starting to look great. Now, I didn't list the services on this because they're going to look different for each college. You're going to see note takers probably. You're going to probably see a support center where they can go for help. You might see tutors coming out of this. They're going to help with potentially books on tape versus the textbook. But they're going to have they have a ton of resources. You have to go find them. They are not going to identify your student, son, or daughter. And last but not least, we're going to move on to the Department of Labor. If all of these services we are talking about, you're kind of scratching your head saying, well, I don't think my child is going to be eligible for any of them because of there's no documentation of a disability. We're going to switch to the next slide, Nancy. Again, there's universal access at the DOL for all of us that are looking for jobs. There are, again, obviously we associate the DOL mostly with unemployment benefits, but there's also a lot of career services for finding a job. There's great stuff on their website to help find jobs. There's great video on their websites to help narrow down what you think you'd like to do. There are career centers like here. We have the Buffalo Employment Training Center. I'm sure downstate and other parts of the state, there are those similar offices where there's lots of resources there with navigators that will help people search for jobs. They also offer workers' protection if we feel that people are being discriminated at their job. They will also go in and work with employers to be sure that they're following all Department of Labor laws. So we are going to take a pause right now, and Sue is going to look at the questions.
So one very important question, how is the weather in Buffalo? Well, it's snowy and most of the schools are closed, but it's not really that snowy. So we're doing just fine. I apologize to Diana, who says she can't hear anything. I'm sure Nancy's probably tried to problem solve with you. But I don't know what to say. So one of the questions is, I'm trying to help the person with the question above on the upper right hand. She's trying to help with the volume. Thank you, Florence. So really the only question I have right now is, will Access VR pay for young adult transition program for students in need of behavioral modification for good work and school behaviors?
Well, you just led us directly into the next section of the presentation, which is all about Access VR.
Go ahead, Nancy.
So, how are we going to first get through this door? Because you need a referral, and you need to complete the application process. So for this group of people on this call, there is a school counselor out there that knows who your Access VR liaison is. Every school has one. There may be a transition coordinator at your school district that knows who that person is.
I'm sorry. Could you mute?
My psychic prediction is that person comes to your school at least twice a year and works again with that transition coordinator or that school counselor to see who is eligible and who wants services. So now to the question about the students right now in transition with behavior for good work experience. We're going to click to the next slide. Because Access VR is all about the job, and because Access VR gets money from the federal government, and they get gold stars from the federal government when they actually have placements. And that's someone in a job, working in that job at or above minimum wage for at least 90 days. It is the ultimate goal of Access VR. But in the 33 somewhat long years I've been doing this, there is finally the recognition that starting with the student on work experience at the age of 21 is too late. So they're finally putting some funding forward to work with students age 14 to 21 who are still in school. Most of us probably, as typical teenagers, had some dabbling in some type of employment, either above board or, above the table or under the table, where we were babysitters, right? We did odd jobs. We cut grass. I was a waitress for my girlfriend's father's catering company and got $35 in cash. I hope the IRS is not on this call. Every Saturday night for washing dishes and waiting tables in fire halls, serving people pork chops, all right? I had that experience. For students with disabilities, those experiences don't come easily, and they need extra support with that. So outside of typical school time, so not during class time, Access VR can work with students age 14 to 21 to do some job exploration and counseling, to do some work-based learning experiences, perhaps over the summer, perhaps over some of the breaks. They can do some counseling on what's available. So when people are asking questions about college, is that realistic? We can start having those conversations with the vocational counselors early on, not the last year of their school services. They will be doing classes on work readiness training and instruction and self-advocacy. So again, that ability to walk through the College of Disability Services offices and say, I need extra time on a test in a quiet room, will be provided through what they're calling pre-ETS services. So that's what Access VR can do while students are still in school. Again, there's going to need to be evidence of some documentation of a disability. But the counselors will work with you, and someone at the school district is probably going to be working with you to help you get into this program, is going to be my guess. There's probably a transition coordinator or someone at the school district level that is going to support entry into pre-ETS. I know that from a friend who was just introduced to this for her daughter in one of the Western New York school districts, and the school counselor was definitely facilitating entry into this service. We're going to move to the next slide. They are, again, looking at students that have IEPs or are on a 504 plan, right? They can be potentially eligible. So there's a little bit of room in here. Again, if you're not checking all the boxes of a documented disability, the school district is also going to give some room, I think, for those students within this service. I think, you're going to see some provider agencies, the not-for-profit providers, who provide kind of lifelong supported employment and employment services to people. You're going to see them entering the school districts with contracts to provide this work, which is going to be great, because as your students age and need to get into the adult service arena, they're already going to be familiar with a couple agencies and a couple people, job coaches, employment specialists. They're going to help them, again, once they're out of school.
I'm jumping in here for a second.
Good.
And the reason I'm jumping in is because the idea of this pre-ETS 14 to 21, the funding for this was just released on January 1st. And there are nonprofits and BOCES folks out there who have gotten approval to provide these services, who are starting to ramp up now. It's not like, they start funding in January. They're putting together their programs and are working with school districts. So if you're a parent or a family member of a student, or you're a student yourself, who is between the ages of, I'm going to say, especially 14, 15, and 16, there are going to be services available that you want to be able to access. And your school may be a partner in your school district may be a partner in one of those projects, and if they're not a partner, you really want to keep an eye out. And the key word is pre-eds. That's what they're called. And you can always call your parent center in your region if you want to learn more about it because you don't really know where to go, or you can talk to your school district. And I'm just a little worried that your school districts may or may not know about them because this is so brand new. You could probably call your Access VR office and they would be able to direct you because the funding is coming through the New York State Access VR offices. I don't think that everybody's got it completely settled. So, like, for instance, in Western New York, there are 2 pre-ed organizations, groups, collaboratives that are coming together, and they're just starting to do some marketing and working with identifying these students and working with them. And not all of them are going to look exactly alike.
I think you're going to see over the Easter break probably, and then over the summer break, there's going to be classes offered on job readiness, work readiness, what behavior is appropriate for work, not appropriate for work. So you're going to see some curriculum coming out that way. Again, addressing the issue much younger than we have in the past, which is awesome.
Now, let me just ask you a question. There's pre-eds that is being done through these 2 grants, but also there's providers who are doing pre-eds kind of as part of a separate contract. And I don't want to go there because it's confusing, but I just want to make sure that people are clear.
So, again, the bottom line is check with your school district. Your transition counselor or school counselor will probably be the most knowledgeable person on what's available, voc readiness-wise, for my son or daughter now. Even if they're in a 504 plan on a Regents track, this is available to them. They just can't get the service at the same time they're getting a school service because state ed funds both sides of this coin. They fund the education side and they fund the voc rehab side. They're not going to give the money at the same time twice. Okay, so that's one way to look at it. Yep. They're not going to pay for 2 services at the same time. All right, I think we can move on.
Well, I had one little question. Will Access VR sponsor college-related to goal if you're with OPWDD?
I am going to address that question right now. So, college and tuition for college is income-based. So you would have to, first and foremost, be eligible for Access VR. After you're eligible for Access VR, get into a college. So if you receive services through OPWDD or you don't see services through OPWDD, you still have to get into the school, right, and meet that entry criteria. And so if you meet the entry criteria to get into college, that's great. If Access VR feels you have the ability to benefit, okay, so you have to prove you're going to benefit from those courses and they're going to get you to your goal. So just because you say, I want to be a marine biologist and I'm going to take Biology 101, they're not going to pay for, and you meet the eligibility criteria for Access VR. You meet the income threshold to get it to pay. You may need to do some testing with them, some reading scores testing, some writing testing, to prove that you can benefit from that class before they're going to help with tuition. That will come through the first bullet point. Again, these are post-pre-ed services. These can be starting to be talked about at the age of 18 or 2 years pre-graduation. The vocational rehab counselor is going to be working with your son or daughter. Again, if they are over 18, you may or may not be in the room while this is happening. They can pay for assessments and evaluations to see if you're ready to work. They can pay for technology to support you working. They will pay for specialized transportation in a limited amount of time to see if you can get to work, need to get to work, need a ride to that evaluation. They will not pay for it into perpetuity. They They will do driver transportation. They will provide work readiness courses and training through a private agency after school is over with. They will provide tuition and fees for college and voc trainer. You want to be a truck driver, you have a disability, they will pay for you to go to tractor trailer school. Again, if you prove you have the ability to benefit from that training course and you meet the income criteria. They will pay for note takers. They will pay for some housing modifications if you are stuck in your home and need a ramp. And that is the only barrier that's preventing you from getting to work. They will do that for you. They will pay private agencies like the Cantalician Center, where I work, to do job development for you. They will pay wages for work tryout. They will provide a job coach for you to go to work with you every day and teach you that job until you've got it down pat yourself. They will buy you tools. They will buy you boots. They will even help you set up your own self-employment type work. But they're going to ask you for a lot of information on like a business plan and things like that before they help fund some of the supplies that you might need. Voc Rehab is your first stop before you go to the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities for employment or before you go to the Office of Mental Health for employment. OPWDD and OMH are Medicaid funded. That means Medicaid is the payer, the last payer in the line. Voc Rehab dollars are federal and state dollars matched together. You need to stop here first before you go into a Medicaid program. And I know this is confusing or complicated, but if you understand the money part of it, you'd understand why they make us do that. If you know your son or daughter is not ready right now, this minute, for a minimum wage job in the community, and you know they need the supports of OPWDD, we still need to stop here and get a denial letter from Access VR. Might be silly, might be complicated, but it's true. So please be sure the transition coordinators or school counselors are getting that denial letter if you want employment services from OPWDD. If you're only looking for day help services from OPWDD, you do not need to make this step. But if you want employment services, you have to stop here first so we can prove we tried to get the other payer to pay for the supports and service before OPWDD kicked in. All right, we got a bunch of questions on Access VR.
Okay, so let me,
College
the webinar are going to be available online to share. The answer to the question is it will be archived and housed on our website, which is where they usually are. The link is. I'm trying to help it for, okay, that's the other one. If you can prove your work goal is related to college program, have college credits already and want to continue, but they refuse because they want to see you hold the job before they will support you attending college, what are your options?
So the rehab counselor that you're going to work with really does have the keys to the kingdom as far as Access VR goes. These are people with advanced degrees in vocational rehab. If they want to see people jump through a hoop or two before they will do that, they are well within their right to ask that. You are also well within your right to appeal that process. So again, there can be a lot of negotiation that goes on because you are actively involved with a counselor trying to develop your own individualized work plan. So I highly recommend whoever is out there supporting that person really work with the counselor.
Okay, we're going to take a break from questions because you're not going to finish this presentation. So can we go to the next slide?
Yeah. So we're going to go into the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. And again, I am only focusing on work here, but OPWDD has a very large and lofty goal to increase the number of people gaining and retaining employment. They want to see people earning minimum wage or better and working in the community. They have revamped a lot of their supports and services. So if you have the picture of the old sheltered workshop in your head, erase that because those are well on their way out. And referral to OPWDD is through your care coordinator. And if you don't
care
have
manager, depending on
care manager where you have. If you don't have one or don't know who that is, please go to the OPWDD website and start clicking on links for care management or care coordination, and get yourself connected to a care coordination organization.
Or call your parent center.
Right, that's a whole other webinar. We're going to switch to the next slide. So before the minimum wage job in the community, the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities offers a lot of pre-employment services. They're called pre-voc. They can be site-based, meaning the agency owns a location where people are training and working, or they can be community-based, out somewhere in the community in a business, either at an agency-run business or at other businesses in the community. The basic goal of both services is the same. We want to do that pre-work before supported employment. Before that job, I'm going to say at Wegmans now because I know Wegmans is even in Brooklyn now, right? So before that job at the grocery store, they're not quite there yet. The maturity level's just not there yet. They're still not quite ready for prime time, as I'd like to say. They need a stop before that. Site-based pre-voc and community-based pre-voc do the exact same thing in that they're trying to expose people and teach people how to work. They're also going to work with you in discovery. What do I want to do? What do I like to do? And if I had more time, I'd tell you a great story about that. So email me if you want to know it. They're also going to do some mobility training, transportation planning, and transportation planning, and they're going to use a person-centered process to do that. The difference between site-based and community-based is the location. Site-based is most likely going to be within a community-based organization, an ARC perhaps that's in your area, a private not-for-profit. Community pre-voc is going to happen in the community, or it's going to happen in a business that the community-based organization now owns and operates. So you're looking at places where there are other people working that don't have disabilities. Both site-based and community pre-voc can be paid, but it's going to be payment at a sub-minimum wage. In order for us to make this a Medicaid billable service, people need to earn below 50% of either minimum or prevailing wage. Most agencies running businesses have a special certificate with the Department of Labor to pay sub-minimum wage. There's a lot of debate on whether that's good or bad. I'm going to tell you, it's a tool. It's a way to teach people how to work while they're working, good, bad, or otherwise. The last thing we need are less options for people right now, I think. And with the increase in the minimum wage out there right now, we're seeing more and more employers being far more demanding of people being able to multitask. Community and site-based pre-voc might be nice options, again, for people coming right out of school. In order to get paid sub-minimum wage, we need to see that denial from Access VR because of some new federal regs that are involved. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. It's complicated. 1248. 1248. All right, pathway to employment. Yeah. Next slide. Pathway to employment can come before and or after community pre-voc, just to make this as confusing as possible. Pathway is an extremely time-limited option. You can be enrolled in Pathway to Employment for 1 year. You get 248 hours. I have no idea where they came up with that number. And it's very prescriptive. First, we're going to do some person-centered planning. Then we're going to learn about your history. Then we're going to learn about what you did when you were in high school, right? What was your vocational profile? We're going to talk to the moms and the dads. We're going to ask, where do they like to go? How do they like to spend their time? We're going to spend a lot of time talking, which might not mean active service delivery. And that's a very important thing to understand. So this may happen 4 hours a week. This is not a place you go during the day. This is a service that is provided to you. You may be taken out into the community to do different work experiences. You might participate in some volunteering and get you to actually try some jobs. All the while, the goal is to prepare you for employment in the community. Again, prescriptive, time limited. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step process. This does not replace a Monday through Friday 8 to 3 service if you are looking for that level of support and supervision. It can be accompanied with community pre-voc or site-based pre-voc, and a lot of organizations do that. Next slide.
Next slide, Nancy.
Next slide, please. No, we went the wrong way. Keep going the other way. And we're going to skip this slide, and you guys can just read it later because I'm running out of time.
And again, we were going to be able to send you this PowerPoint after this session. And while she's changing, I'm just going to ask just a couple quick questions, and just yes or no's. Does Access VR work with staffing firms?
Most likely no, because we're looking for a permanent job for that individual to get that Gold Star Access VR needs to receive their federal reimbursement, not a temporary job.
Okay.
Although all work experience is good work experience while you're trying to get to that permanent job.
Okay, and if your child's in school, you go to your school psychologist for IQ test.
Absolutely. If they will do it, yeah.
And they should do it, and it should be built into the goals and objectives of the IEP and built into it so that it's an effective transition plan.
And you want that adult score. So if they just keep updating the WISC that they did when the child was 12, not good enough to get through some of those doors we talked to for eligibility.
And why we say that 21 is too late is because that is when your entitlement for school is over. So you are now entering into the world of voluntary agencies in which you need to deal with and go through the skinny door of eligibility to any of these services we're talking about.
And why we say it's late is if you're looking for a support the day after graduation, these systems move glacially. They are not entitlement. You don't have to say, I need my kid to be enrolled in school tomorrow. You use eligibility based, and that's really different.
You have 8 minutes.
I have 8 minutes to talk about some. Okay. So supported employment is work in the community at minimum wage. Both Access VR and OPWDD and OMH provide this support. They want to see you out in the community doing a job. We're going to provide job coaching to do that for you. We're going to do skills training. We're going to work on retention. We may work on setting your smartphone to go off at the right time every morning so you know when to start looking for the paratransit bus to come pick you up. Supported employment also means you're earning income, and that income will affect your benefits. So we're going to do some benefit planning with you, because the last thing we want to have happen is to go through all of this work, and then someone's going to see a Social Security check go down and say, never mind, he can't work, it hurts his benefit. Through benefits planning, you will learn ways to save money. Through benefits planning, you will also learn that by working, you will always come home with more money in your pocket. Supported employment will also work with career planning, knowing everyone's first job is not their last job, and they will work with you again on how you sort of move up within the career ladder within a company, or moving from one job to the next. And then the last slide, so we still have time for questions, is the Office of People. Nancy, if you can move, there we go. So in order to help people move from community pre-voc or site-based pre-voc to that minimum wage job, it's a big leap. They offer the employment training program. And through the employment training program, they do a lot of supports, they do a lot of they do a lot of discovery and classes, but the biggest thing to know is a paid internship. New York State will pay wages for your son or daughter if they are in the ETP program for 6 to 18 months to convince the employer they are ready to have that job. And that's the most important thing you need to know. ETP and the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities will also begin getting involved with students prior to graduation. Once again, they're going to be working with your transition counselors. Ask them who the ETP staff are. Each ETP staff is a liaison to a school district, and they can start providing these services pre-graduation, so 21 isn't too late.
All right, I have a question here. that I think is a good one. I mean, a lot of them are good. If I'm working with students that are very autistic, mostly nonverbal, no independence in the community, and will not be traveling independently, and are not able to really be on a work site totally independently, I imagine that they would not be candidates for Access VR. Am I correct?
Most likely not. And Nancy, if you want to move on to the next slide, I forgot I still have one more flow chart that might help with this as well. Okay. So day hab, right, might be the place they go right from school.
What is
maybe not. And day hab is kind of every support or service the individuals might need to be successful outside of school during the day that isn't work, but could also work toward preparing them for work. Some site-based and community-based pre-voc programs offer a lot of eyes-on supervision. So the person may do well there, even given the level of support that they needed in school. But to be in community-based or site-based pre-voc where the person's earning money, we need to go to Access VR to get the denial because of the federal WIOA laws, which are complicated. So just trust me on that one.
Okay. Is there support for specialized jobs such as junior developer, graphic designer, website designer, or something similar to tech?
That would be a question for Access VR. If it's going to depend on if they fund you for education for those jobs, will they then fund you for the supports and services on the job? I will say the more complicated and technical the job, the harder it will be for an agency to find a job coach that knows how to help with that. Access VR and that person's option to get more technical and adaptive equipment support might be the way to spend those Access VR dollars versus a coach coming in to train.
Okay. My daughter was not referred by her high school. How do I get her in now? She's 20 and privately placed in a young, oh dear, somebody was just, I'm sorry.
Okay.
She was privately placed in a young adult transition program. We have documentation and IEPs for 8 years. She failed her first semester in college.
Yeah. Access VR is your definite point of entry into getting supports and services, either to get her supports for continued training, maybe not at the college level, but at some kind of other certificate type program, or to get training for job placement. So you definitely want to go to the Access VR website, and that'll prompt you on how to apply. Or look up your local Access VR district office. I'm sure there's a number there, a phone number there, or there's a 1-800 number in this presentation, and you should absolutely apply. So it is never too late to apply for these services, but if you want that transition to go smoothly, you should be doing them well before they graduate.
Okay, so how does employment services, supports and services interface with self-direction?
It's a great question. Supported employment or community pre-voc would need to become part of that person's self-directed budget. It'll look exactly the same as the service goes. The only thing that's going to look different is how the private agency is going to get paid. So the money's going to flow through the self-directed payments, not through me billing Medicaid directly.
Okay, does Access VR get money from Social Security for putting participants on one ticket to work incentive programs offered through SSA?
Potentially. Yes, if they're eligible for a ticket, Access VR, that was their old name, Access VR might hold the ticket, or Access VR may give the ticket to the private provider that's going to support the person in the job.
Okay, do pre-eds apply to a student who is already in college but under the age of 21 and registered with the College Disability Services Office but not necessarily Access VR yet?
That is an awesome question.
It is a good one. I think, yeah.
That I have absolutely no idea the answer to. So that is where I would contact your local Access VR district office and ask that question. It's a really, if they're paying and supporting the person for college,
they're already in Access VR.
They're already in Access VR, and they're already getting services from them.
But
if
they're
not, they may not need pre-eds, but they'll kick them into the adult voc rehab supports and services to do pre-eds-like activities with them.
Right, and I think this is where it gets confusing. Pre-ETS has been around for a while, and it's part of the menu of services that Access VR can provide. The pre-ETS that I was talking about is kind of like before you get to Access VR. The pre-ETS, I think that's what they should call them. So in the case of this, if the student is in school already using Access VR, they can ask for some pre-ETS services, and I'm not 100% sure what I'm saying. I think I'd go with Asking VR. Okay. And it's 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so I really want to be cognizant of people's time. And I think we have to, let me do a few infomercials.
Let me just say thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you for the, again, the great questions, and you were listening.
Questions are great.
And again, work with your partners here in transition if there's more questions, and I can always follow up with folks later.
Okay, so just a couple of directions to give to people. Number one, there's going to be an evaluation that you're going to get emailed to you. And if you have questions and you identify yourself, we can probably route them to different people. I don't want to make any promises. But if you're in the New York City area and you have questions and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know where to go, I'm going to recommend that you contact Include NYC. You can Google them. They have transition people there who can work with you to help you to navigate systems and make sure that you're on the right page. If you're in our area, the Western New York, Buffalo area, then you can obviously contact Parent Network of Western New York. If you are in the Rochester area, you can contact Starbridge, which is another parent center. And if you're someplace else in the state and you don't know who to call, you can go to a website that's called Parent Center Hub, parentcenterhub.org. And that is a nice comprehensive list of all the parent centers in New York State, actually across the country. And you can filter yourself to New York State and find a parent center near you who can help you with trying to navigate these systems. And they will ask you lots of questions so that we can figure out which systems you need to go into. I hope this was helpful. I'm so appreciative that you all joined us. And by all means, fill out the evaluation that Nancy will send, and she will also send a copy of the PowerPoint. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Stay warm.